Welcome to the post-game live episode of The Independent, everyone. I'm Pete Sampson, joined by Matt Fortuna in Chicago. I am still in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Field after Notre Dame's 31-13 victory over Georgia Tech, which Matt, I said this before we started recording. I think in some ways this may go down as the least memorable performance of the season. I think that when we look back at if Notre Dame's in the playoff or even if they're not, we would have a hard time picking out anything that happened in this game other than a beautiful fake punt in the fourth quarter, which ultimately didn't lead to any points.
Yeah, that was a beautiful fake, and in real time, between that and I believe it was Tyler Buckner, the announcing crew. I think
yes,
it was Chris Leonard.
It was updated in the final book. It says Tyler Buckner.
Well, I saw them all crowding Buckner on the sideline. I'm like, it was probably him. I forgot he changed his jersey number. I guess Marcus Freeman explained that away as such. In real time, watching that one on TV, it feels like you're like, is there some personal thing here going on? Like we've seen this, not with Marcus Freeman, but throughout college football. And then I was like anxiously awaiting the post-game handshake to see if anything happened. Instead, it was like this huge bro embrace and Freeman covering his lips, whispering something to Key's ear that he absolutely understood and did not take personally. So, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it was about as ordinary a game as you can hope for if you're Notre Dame. And I mean that in a good way when you're playing a Georgia Tech team that is without its starting quarterback, who is a huge part of that offense. Yeah. You want this game to be pretty boring in that regard. And I think especially defensively, the way they just completely sucked the life out of that Georgia Tech run game was very, very impressive.
Yeah, they had put up 600 yards rushing their last 2 weeks. And I think the fourth quarter started with, they were like at 34 yards, which, was why a special teams gaffe sort of depressed a little bit. But I mean, even they finished with 29 carries as a team for 64 yards. And if you took out all the yards that they lost, which were a lot, it still would be under 100 yards for a team that is averaging 200, I think, for the season. So I thought they just whipped Georgia Tech. And I think I get it. The quarterback change was huge, going from Haynes King to Zach Pyron. However, Georgia Tech's offensive line is good. Like, that's a good front, even for an inexperienced quarterback. And Notre Dame did not give anything away on the ground. I think that ultimately, I had the margin of victory correct at 28-10. There was a time where I was like, I felt way off in the first quarter. And then by the time the third quarter rolled around, I thought it was going to be more like 45-7. So it was a game that had some pretty big swings to it. But overall, to me, a reminder, look, defense travels always. Offense sometimes travels, sometimes doesn't. Sometimes in the course of the same game, it's there and then it's not.
And special teams,
who knows? Like, sometimes, yes. You've got a walk-on kickoff specialist and a walk-on kicker. But I just sort of like a taking care of business kind of game to me for Notre Dame. And Marcus Freeman post-game was very philosophical. I'm going to go through the transcript of this one, but he was getting into some deep thoughts about football and maybe the interception or how you bounce back from an early setback, because Notre Dame has given up early touchdowns pretty consistently this season. He's like, that's life. That's what you got to go through. And he talked about how he showed film of some sprinter who hit a hurdle and then fell down, but got up and won the race. I'm not sure what race it was or who the hurdler was, but he's like, sometimes you hit some hurdles in life. And I was like, okay, I think I'm buying what you're selling here. But there was just a lot of philosophy. And what I asked him was, and I'm curious if you agree with this or not, for how much younger Notre Dame actually is now than they were when the season started, because of Benjamin Morrison, Botello, Traore's young player, but still, I feel like they're maturing as a team too. So they're sort of simultaneously older and younger at the same time. And you end up just sort of knocking out the opponent that was presented in front of you today. They did not play down to the competition, which I think is a complaint sometimes from Notre Dame fans. They pretty much brushed them aside after a shaky first quarter.
Yeah, I was not ignoring you there. I was watching USC drop a pass on 4th and 2. Maryland now is storming the field. 4-3 Maryland beats 3-4 USC. And Pete, for all the questions we had about Notre Dame's schedule this year, I got to say it's somehow much, much worse.
Oh my God!
And Florida State suck. Army, Navy are really good. And actually, A&M's really good too. That's going to maybe be the win of the year when all is said and done throughout college football. I'm like not shocked by this, if that makes sense. Like, you talk about a team that's not cut out for the Big Ten, but I'm with you in the sense of like, this is a mature young team. Notre Dame, I'm talking about here. They aided Schuler,
USC,
not Schuler. Yeah, no, pick 6 at the end. Like, that was a guy who had a big game in the opener, a guy who ended up, making waves in camp. And I think we saw some of this in camp, and, was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? It felt like they let the kids play back in August and let young guys have honest opportunities to take older guys' spots. And in a way they probably couldn't have imagined it, it's paying dividends as far as they're going to need all hands on deck to get through these last 5 games.
Yep.
The number of injuries they've suffered, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. Xavier Watts with another pick, the 10th for his career. I had to look this up because 10 just seems like absurdly high for anyone.
Yeah.
Where does that rank all time? And I'm talking about all of college football. I won't ask you the name or the school or the year because it's irrelevant. Do you know what the actual record is for most interceptions in a college football career by one person?
In a career?
Yeah.
No, I have no idea.
Take a guess, an over-under. What?
17.
Yeah. I thought that would be on the high end. It's actually 27.
Whoa.
By Martin Bayless of Bowling Green from 1980 to 1983. And there are actually
Martin Bayless to make an appearance on the pod tonight.
There are a number of people who've had 20 plus, which just seems. Ed Reed's on there, Jim Leonard. Okay, there are some real good names. Terrell Buckley on here. But yeah, that's just absurd. 10 interceptions in a career for a converted receiver after what he did last year. I thought for sure there was no way for Xavier Watts to replicate the production on paper that he did last year, and he's almost on his way to doing that. As crazy as
I think he's better. The Athletic, we had our
better,
All-American teams, and in the preseason, I argued for Watts as a first team preseason selection, but I was okay with him being second team behind Caleb Downs and I think Malachi Starks at Georgia. But I was adamant that he needed to be on the first team for us at midseason after the way he's played. I think he is a much better player than he was last year, and last year he was outstanding. So that's sort of that's the defense travels part of it. I think a cool bit from post game was Marcus Freeman mentioned this, and Leonard Moore, the freshman corner, actually came in for post game media as well. That from his hospital where he got the surgery on his hip, Ben Morrison was sending film cut-ups to the corners. And Marcus Freeman referenced this. I think it might have been the first thing he said. It's just this win, it took everybody. And maybe it took some people who weren't even here. So, but I think that gets back to this team feels like it's maturing. Even the giving up early touchdowns, I think Notre Dame fans on Twitter might not be used to it, but the defense itself, it was it's fine. No problem. That will be the last touchdown that we give up the rest of the game. Now, Georgia Tech is the second team to score multiple touchdowns against Notre Dame all season. Louisville had 3, Georgia Tech 2, everybody else 1 except for Miami, who had 0. That's an every week thing. That's sort of baked into Notre Dame's game plan. So I think it's back to Notre Dame feels like it's a team that is maturing to me, even as it gets younger, which is a weird dynamic, but I just don't know how you could argue against what you're seeing.
No, and when we were previewing this game and coming up with our predictions, we assumed Haynes King either wouldn't play or would be severely limited if he did play. And we both came to the same conclusion, right? It's I don't know how Georgia Tech would score more than twice, short of a pick 6 or something crazy. And they didn't. They got one at the end.
They had to sacrifice Zach Pyron at the altar of Al Golden to get it.
I love, I don't want to say I love, but talk about a guy who has that dog in him, stays out there for the 2-point conversion while he's holding his arm. I think you retweeted Bill Connolly, I think from ESPN, came up with dog in him stat. And Ian
we need to get Ian Book on the show to discuss.
Yeah, Ian was not former roommate of Sean Crawford, as we learned on last week's pod. They like beat and battered him toward the end. Again, credit for him for standing in there and scoring a meaningless touchdown at the end. But it's going to be a chore, no matter who you are, to score on this defense. Honestly, no matter how battered this defense is. I know like they're dropping like flies over there, but they're so dominant, particularly up front. The way they take away what you want to do so well, whether it's the run game with Georgia Tech, the pass game with Louisville, even Tyler Shuck, they beat up really good. I know he had decent enough numbers and made some big plays, but he had to earn.
Oh yeah, they rocked him multiple times.
It's a chore to play these guys, and if the offense can do its part, more power to it. I would have liked to have seen more from the pass game, as I'm sure everyone would. But again, it was, short of the fakes and short of the white pants. Can we get rid of those? Like,
my God,
Georgia Tech had more gold on their uniforms today than Notre Dame did.
The white pants and Marcus Freeman's drop on the sideline and Riley Leonard's interception. All those were terrible. Everything else today, pretty good for Notre Dame.
Last year at Clemson and today in Atlanta, like your 2 trips to like that part of the country, and you're not showing off like what makes you, right? Like you got the gold helmets, we need the gold pants too. Yeah. It doesn't look good either, in my opinion, but whatever. A dominant second half. We talk about special teams. I mean, the one was muff, but they were responsible for 2 blown kicks on Georgia Tech's part as well. And again, thankfully, with Jeter sideline, it didn't come down to anything too dramatic. It was nice to see Yom have that celebration after the first one. You could tell he was really mad at himself after missing the second one as well. But just a relatively clean performance, like the performance you would hope to see out of the team. You could tell Marcus Freeman really had respect for Brent Key and what he's done with this roster, with this program over his 2+ years in charge of it as well.
Yeah, it was a performance that makes me more confident that they will run the table, which I probably should not say out loud because Navy is really freaking good. And in terms of quarterbacks that you can beat up that they won't flinch, Horvath from there is number 1 on the list. Like, I believe he is number 2 in the Bill Conley's dog ratings for this year, behind Diego Pavia from Vanderbilt. So I don't know if they're as mature next week as they were today. I think that they will be fine. You probably against Navy, Riley Leonard's pick will hurt you more than it did today. But I think they even got a taste for what Navy is like today when Georgia Tech limited them to 4 possessions in the first half, because that's exactly how it's going to play out with Navy next week. You're not going to have a lot of opportunities, and so you can't make a dumb decision like that, which Leonard did. And afterwards, he was asked about it. He was like, basically, the question was, what did you see on the interception? He was like, more like what I didn't see, like just stupid. Like that was just a dumb play. You can't throw that against that coverage. And like they put it in during the week in practice. It hit all 5 times, so that the call's on, and then Georgia Tech gave him a different defense. And he's just like, you can't just run stuff because it worked on a Tuesday without paying attention to what the defense is doing. And he didn't pay attention to what the defense is doing. So maybe even there's a lesson for an old quarterback there as well. So I just feel like this team, despite all the losses in terms of personnel, still feel like this team is getting better.
I do too, and I think I think Army's better than Navy. 2, Navy had 24 points in the first quarter today against, I think, Charlotte. And
by the way, do you know who Charlotte's linebackers coach is? Greer Martini. They shouldn't have been able to run the option at all.
I almost said Michael Deeb. I knew it was a random.
The option specialist. Still, that's how you know Navy's really good. They ran all over a Greer Martini defense today.
Biff Poggi's son was a spotter today for Big Ten Network at Northwestern Wisconsin. Random fun facts, just because we're talking about Charlotte right now, and I was at that game earlier today. I think Notre Dame right now is playing 1 against human nature, 2 against just like the football idea of like they've had so many injuries and the season's still so young that I just have like this, there's this like piano hanging above them feeling when it comes to health. The other part too, and they had however many home games in a row, so we didn't get to deal with this. Look, I get it. It's a new era. It's playoff or bust. It's a 12-team playoff. It's the first year. They're all broadcast by ESPN. Notre Dame finally played a game on ESPN today. Every single conversation during the game, at halftime, everything was like ESPN's playoff predictor. And let's just remind you, if they win this one, their chances go up. But if they lose this one, their chances go down. And
tell
look at
me
that
more,
schedule.
Professor.
It's just like, and I get it. Like, it's a blowout. You got to find things to talk about. But even the halftime report, it was just like, okay, we get it. Like, they can't lose. Same as it was before, right? Like, 14. It's
in the history of the sport.
Honestly, they're the least fascinating to me because it's pretty simple. If you're them, like, try being the fourth or fifth place SEC team this year with all the carnage that's going on in that league. Like, I get it. It's new. It's different. But like, talk about beating a dead horse. That was a lot for me.
Well, before we get into questions, a reminder, listeners of The Independent, go to rowback.com, get 20% off your first order using the promo code Irish. They have Notre Dame licensed gear, of which I see much about various stadiums, including this one today. So go to rowback.com, use the promo code Irish, get 20% off your first order, get Notre Dame gear or different gear. Up to you. It's totally fine. We won't be offended. But use promo code Irish. If you don't use that, we will be offended.
Speaking of which, I'm wearing a shirt that says Domes on Domers right now. You could get that for 40% off on obviousshirts.com. At least for the next hour or so. Vanderbilt's losing to Ball State 7-6 quarter, which I didn't think they'd lose. I didn't think they'd cover a 27.5-point spread after the weeks they've had and with Texas on deck. However, Obvious Shirts. There's great shirts like this. There are logo shirts. There's quarter zips. There are crew necks. All available from our friends on Obvious Shirts. Great to see the feedback from those so far. Thank you to them for partnering with us on this gear. I even bought some Halloween gear. They have some cool Halloween stuff that I'm going to wear. Not costumes, but Halloween-themed stuff that I'll be wearing while trick-or-treating around the neighborhood with my kids in a couple of weeks. But thanks to our friends at Obvious Shirts. Please go on their website. And again, while you can, as long as Vanderbilt's still winning, 40% off the Domes on Domers gear in honor of our friend Clark Lee and his Commodores putting 40 points up in a win over Alabama, which looked good at the time 2 weeks ago. And also,
they're mid-level SEC program now.
Thank you to everyone who is subscribed and watching live right now on our YouTube channel. Please continue to do that. Continue to ask questions, leave comments, and please subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Pete, let's go to questions. Right, what I was talking about. Alex Weiser, play-by-play crew, was talking a lot about ND needing to build a resume to make the playoffs by running up the score. Anyway, a one-loss ND with 4 ranked wins doesn't make the playoff. No, they're in with 1 loss.
Yeah. Nor do I think, like, if they had beaten Georgia Tech 52-13, I don't think it would have made a difference at all. Like, I think Notre Dame's schedule is what it is. They can't do anything about the fact that USC is a tire fire. They can't do anything that Florida State is whatever is worse than a tire fire. And Army and Navy are good, but, like, you have to beat both of those teams to be taken seriously. So not a lot Notre Dame could do about any of that. I think, the best resume lines for Notre Dame are the ones that are happening in College Station right now. They got out of Starkville today, 34-24 against Mississippi State. They're 6-1. They're 4-0 in the SEC, which is a heck of a lot better than Alabama's 2-2. So, like, there's a pretty good chance that Texas A&M will be playing for the SEC championship. I'm not going to pencil them in yet. They have LSU next week. If they get LSU, it's in College Station. They got a great shot at it, because after that, they're at South Carolina, home to New Mexico State, at Auburn, also a tire fire, and then they have Texas at the end. So very, very good shot that they could get through the SEC at 7-1.
They have a very good shot. I wouldn't pencil them in just yet. I think, obviously the schedule works in their favor. That trip to South Carolina is tough. And honestly, Auburn's dangerous in the set. Like Auburn's dangerous the way USC's dangerous. Like they're a tire fire
themselves.
They have talent. If they decide to put it all together on any given Saturday, they're capable of beating a lot of good teams. So, but I mean, we've said this in real time. We said it before. I'll say it again. I thought Texas at Texas A&M after my trip to A&M was going to be the most electric environment in college football this season. You throw in the fact that one, maybe two teams are playing for SEC title game spot on top of it. That is going to be absolutely bonkers. It was already bonkers when Notre Dame went there in week 1. So that would be very, very cool. Let's go to Cayman Beavers. Thoughts on Bo Collins so far this season? He's our leading receiver, but has a good amount of drop balls and stops on routes. Any idea why he stopped on that interception by Riley?
Leonard said it was a terrible decision first. Probably a terrible throw second. Like there was no, hey, Bo Collins could fight for it. Could he have? Sure. I think Bo Collins was like, well, he's obviously not throwing it to me. I'm being double covered at the goal line. This route is dead against cover 3. And then the ball's like, oh crap, what the heck? Maybe he could have tackled the guy in the end zone. I don't think he would have got to the ball itself, but I will give Bo Collins the benefit of the doubt on this one, but you're right. Absolutely. Last week he had the drop that I think turned into a pick, or no, the drop, and then he had a fumble that was the turnover. So he's been spotty. But I mean, overall today he finishes with 9 targets, 5 catches, 51 yards. That's fine. I thought it was more significant that Mitchell Evans was involved in the passing game again. That's a change from where things have been the first half of the season. So that could be something to build on the rest of the way. But Mitchell Evans, question from John Duffy, thoughts on Mitchell Evans, more of a blocking scheme mindset? I would say up until today, yes. I love that they ran this screen pass in the first half that was like a wheel route and then a screen and a throwback. It had like 3 options to it, which was really cool to see. End up going to Evans for first down by the goal line. That drive turned into a touchdown. So if you can just get Mitchell Evans to give you something, then man, Riley Leonard's in a much better place as a passer when number 88 is live as a target, which he was today.
Yeah, it's interesting. His final catch of the game, went for nothing, but he got up and seemed, at least on TV, seemed very, very frustrated. I wasn't sure if the play didn't go well or if something just didn't feel right physically, but I do think it was a very, very small incremental step in the right direction because that's a guy they're going to need to make plays in the second half of the season. Cayman Beavers again. By the way, I love Cayman, your 33 trucking logo avatar. If you know, 2017. Will BMO be like Jalen Smith when it comes to the draft, where Jalen was a surefire first-round draft pick, then had an injury and fell? Does the same thing happen to BMO? No and no. I'm not saying he won't fall, but I don't look at those situations similar at all. Jalen Smith was as Sean Crawford told us last week, like just a generational talent and prospect to come through Notre Dame's program. Not saying Morrison isn't a great player, won't have a great career, but like when we saw him in real time in Ohio State, his first career game 2 years ago, we're like, oh, this player's good. Where'd he come from? You know, like Jalen Smith has just taken a starting job his first day on campus because he's a freak. And Smith's injury, again, I don't want to say one's worse or better than the other, but that was
anytime nerve damage is involved, that's worse.
That was the pre-opt-out era. It was like just a terrible what could have been, there. Not that he didn't get a cup of coffee in the NFL, but it's still hard to think of a bigger what if as far as NFL careers coming through Notre Dame.
No question.
I've been covering the team. Dad Farley, I think you know what our thoughts are because we said it.
It looks like they forgot to pack the gold ones, and we're like, oh crap, we got these white ones. We got to wear these, I guess.
It's funny because I saw them post, I think, on Instagram first, and they only posted the white. Like it was like a slideshow, and I think the first picture was white pants, and I was like, "What's this?" And then I slid, and I'm like, "Oh, so they're going to wear this?" And then you watched it on TV, and you were there. And it had that reaction of like,
incomplete.
All right, we got our stuff. Like we're just gonna someone go to a Goodwill right now and buy every pair of white pants. I don't know. I don't get it. Like you're the Golden Domers. Like
Yeah, they had a chartered flight from Atlanta to Baltimore to the Under Armour headquarters to be like, we need 100 pairs of white pants.
Mutual
We
respect
forgot our gold.
coming up.
Yeah, we forgot our gold ones in South Bend.
I was at Wisconsin Northwestern earlier today. That was an Under Armour Bowl, and we'll have another one next week with Navy and Notre Dame. And I thought I would never make such a joke, but I thought during the lacrosse championship between Maryland and Notre Dame, the loser would have to sign a 10+ year extension with Under Armour. But it turned out both just did that right before the game anyway.
Yeah.
So what do I know? Michael Allen, watched ND football since 1967. Love them, but Army will be ND. I just love that comment. Not like necessarily the last part, but just like
that
I can feel while I read that comment as we see all the four horsemen.
Do you not think that Navy is better than Army, or are you reverse on that?
I think Army's better. I could be wrong, but
okay. I feel like Navy is better, which I feel like Army is certainly more established from the headsets down with Monken than Navy is, but I don't know. I just feel like Navy comes into the Notre Dame game more tested by its schedule,
yes,
and way more familiar with playing like Notre Dame. Like playing Notre Dame is not a big deal to Navy. They do it every year.
But maybe that's why, like the stink of last year for Navy, maybe I just can't wash myself of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be Notre Dame might have a hard time taking Navy seriously because they play every year. And last year, Navy didn't even belong on the same field as Notre Dame. So
country.
I don't know. There's a lot of like mentality stuff that's interesting this week heading towards Navy.
WV renovation. Has the offense line grown more than you expected given the injuries? I thought they played really well overall. They've not been, based on what I expected coming into the year, and then the preseason injuries, and then the in-season injuries, they've not gotten in the way of things the way I would have predicted they would have, given all of that attrition. Am I educated enough, like, say Michael Jr. or someone to say like they've done this or that extremely well? No, but like you know, like much like special teams, you notice them when they're not good, and you have not noticed them mostly for the right reasons so far. And I think Riley Leonard has something to do with that too.
Yeah, I mean there was a play where I think Knapp and Wagner got beat badly on the same rep, and Leonard just spun out of it and threw it incompletion. So yeah, I don't think I would look at the offensive line and say like this is a strong unit, but it hasn't been like a trapdoor for the entire offense either. And I wasn't entirely sure that they were going to be good enough for that not to be the case. I think they've sort of held up their end of the bargain. Like Notre Dame was not going to win this year because of its offensive line, but it hasn't lost this year because of its offensive line either. Like when the games have been close, I think the offensive line has been a positive. At A&M, they were a positive. I do think that getting Billy Schrouth back whenever that happens will be significant because, like, Rocco Spindler has been they need to upgrade that position. But I think what Pat Coogan has done instead of Ashton Craig has been pretty impressive. Pendleton is a redshirt freshman. Like, you get beat sometimes. Anthony Knapp had a hold today that wiped out a Jeremiah Love touchdown run that it had nothing to do with the play. Like, Love was getting by that defensive end either way. So, yeah, I mean, they haven't been perfect. I don't think anyone expects them to be. But overall, I think that WV renovation has a typo of okayed instead of played. I think that they've okayed really well. Like,
I read it as played. But, all right.
Yeah, I think he meant played, but I think that there's a Freudian slip there. The offensive line has okayed this season, but I think that's a win for Notre Dame.
Michael Allen says Navy sucks, Army is a beast. After saying he thinks Army will beat Notre Dame. I'll take a guess of where he went to school, but
yeah,
he's not.
Or what branch he served in.
Exactly. Patrick Walsh, Love. This is a good one. Love is the most electric offensive player since Will Fuller. Thoughts? When I hear the word electric, I think home run threat. So
yeah,
there's probably like I'm like, oh, Kyron Williams is great, but like, was he a home run threat? It wasn't exactly a speed.
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot of
long
runs.
Was best in the country. Was he a home run threat? He was a tight end. It's hard to say.
Well, I would say it's Love because I feel similarly every time he touches the ball, like this might score. Like he's so sudden that's what reminds me of Fuller the most. Like he's never going to like Fuller is. I don't think they're going to have a player as electric or more electric than Fuller in a long, long time. And that's not a bad thing. Fuller was that good, but I think Love is right there in terms of like he touches the ball and you're like, you kind of like gasp because they're like, this might go. And that you just feel that way even on 2-yard runs sometimes that like he might get out of there. Like so there was I think it was a jump cut in the first half, and like Tyler Horka from On 3 was next to me, and it was just like, geez, like he makes moves on the football field that don't look natural to me. Like normal humans should not be able to do them.
Patrick J. Subkowski, adds, Jeremiah Love is the best ND back of the 21st century. Thoughts? I think he'll be the highest drafted. Does that make him the best in college? I mean, it's a pretty high bar between Audric Estime and Kyron Williams. And
yeah, I mean, look, that Julius Jones would be included in that too.
Yeah.
And he was awesome. Based on Patrick's photo, I don't know if he watched a whole lot of Julius Jones. Well, Julius Jones was at Notre Dame, but that guy was freaking great. And had a lot of. It was like built a little bit more like Kyron Williams, but powerful a little bit more like Jeremiah Love. But I think Love's outstanding. And the best part about Jeremiah Love is he's only a sophomore.
Don't forget Dexter Williams during the end of that 2018 season.
Yeah, he had a hot minute there.
Eugene adds, not yet. Kyron also adds, could be though. Paul Kinlan, who would you give the game ball to? I feel like I haven't seen these videos as much this year as I did in years past.
I think I'd probably go Watts. Had the pick. Georgia Tech didn't really do anything offensively the whole game. They had one huge play. I think it was like a 60-yarder in the second half. But overall, I thought that Notre Dame won in all 3 phases, but they really won on defense today. So I would probably go with Xavier Watts.
I'd go Watts or Mills. But yeah, it's been a minute since. Actually, a couple people have added this.
Yeah, Drake Bowen had 9 tackles.
He was.
Yeah, he's not a place kicker though.
Oh yeah, I wonder what PK player of I don't know.
Pick Drake Bowen? I don't know.
Bowen was vicious. Someone else said he was playing like a man possessed today, and I agree.
He had a play where he wiped somebody out on the sideline. I think with Watts actually, and yeah, he plays with a real violence that is fun to watch. So I think Drake Bowen is maybe a little bit underrated just because like middle linebackers, that's the cross they have to bear.
WV renovation. Wow, the 12 Bush lattes. I don't know if he meant lattes and lights that are required for every game. Kicked in on my spelling on the first question. I hope this isn't your work account and this isn't your business. But other than that, judgment free from us two here. Speaking of which, how was your Friday night in Atlanta, Pete?
Oh, it was great. It's a special shout out to Matt O'Brien, who I met. I can't remember the bar.
I went to high school with Matt O'Brien. I'm sure.
Okay, really? I mean, who didn't? But his bachelor party was in Atlanta, in town with family. It was like, Pete, love the podcast. I'm going to forgive the fact that he said he had to listen to it 3 times to make it through it because he fell asleep on the first 2. Which I was like, okay, you stuck with it. I'm not going to be insulted by this. But met him and his family at, I wish I could remember the name of the bar outside of Atlanta. But yeah, it was, he was very proud of himself for not having a fall wedding. So his wedding date is actually December 21st. Just the first round of the college football playoff.
You mean like the date, not the anniversary?
Yes, that's the date. The Saturday of the first round of the college football playoff. So
those are our listeners. I love it. That's
come on.
That's my
Let's
type
get
of
it together.
I figured something out, and wait, what's going on? A very Curb Your Enthusiasm like moment. Very, very cool. Also, just to clarify one thing, hold on, I just lost here. Regine said PK asked the question. See, Pete, I knew it wasn't place kicker.
Okay.
Our listeners are smarter than that. They wouldn't get positions wrong or dates wrong of playoff games. Or
they're Bush lattes, all that good stuff.
That. Kim and Beavers, BMO coming back next year. I doubt it. I don't have inside information.
I don't have it. I know that some other media members have sort of floated that idea. I don't understand it as a proposition. He's not coming back to potentially get hurt again doesn't make any sense. Going pro to rehab to full fitness and while being paid does make sense. I don't think there's a whole lot he can put on tape that's going to be like, oh, you're going to cover the next Marvin Harrison Jr. expertly in a college football game. Like, we've already seen you do that. We don't need to see you do it again. So I would think that Benjamin Morrison's college career at Notre Dame, unfortunately, has come to an end.
Yeah, I think very, very rarely do you see guys as already highly touted at the draft boards as him come back. You might see second, fringe third rounders come back. You might see a group of like senior class come back together to accomplish something. But I think it's working against Notre Dame in that regard.
It does. Like this feels like maybe the end of a group together. Mills, Cross, Kaiser, Watts, Morrison. Like, I think they all sort of go out together, opposed to what you're saying. Like, I mean, that's what they had this year. They had Watts, Mills, Cross, Kaiser coming back together. Next year, I think it's a new. Next year, I feel like will feel like a very new generation of Notre Dame football for a lot of people, because there will be a lot of turnover.
Kevin Landers, Jeremiah loves blocking today. Hard eyes emoji. I mean, when your running back plays that way and has that kind of name, it lends itself to all sorts of puns and other fun things. But I agree. I mean, again, like we said, Drake Bowen played like a man possessed today. Like Jeremiah Love runs and blocks like a man possessed, like you said, Pete. I mean, he gets the ball in his hands, and it's like there are few people in every sport where I think every time, like a Stephen Curry rising for a three or a Lamar Jackson taking off, where like you should feel everyone in the stadium just like collectively like get ready for something big to happen. And I get that feeling every time he gets the ball, especially in the open field.
It's funny. It's a run blocker. I asked him about it a couple of weeks ago when he was in for Access, and I was like, do you enjoy doing this, or like what's the? And he said he did it in high school. Run blocking is pretty natural. I just throw my body into somebody. If it's a defensive end, I get in their way. If it's a linebacker, I just blow them up. And yeah, I mean, it's like he sort of gets all that explosive ability, but then puts it through the chest of a defender. That is also fun to watch. Riley Leonard, he was asked about it, and he's like, live, he doesn't really know it when it's happening, but on film, he's like, damn, like this guy. I think he called him a freight train in run blocking.
Freight train is appropriate descriptor. And Kyron Williams, that's where he really grew from year one to year two when he was a freshman, and then you watch him in that Clemson game, the one they won in 2020. Like he made some plays where he just put his head down and took on the guy who came his way and gave Ian Book all sorts of extra time. I'm running out of time here. I know you've got a story to write and have some other friends, I think. Are you reconvening tonight with your crew?
No. I'm going to try to keep a low profile. Even in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, there was a lot of independent listeners based on the number of people that were yelling at me as I was walking off the field. So hopefully they enjoyed the show on their way back to Buckhead or Midtown or wherever people are partying tonight in Atlanta, because I think Notre Dame fans probably feeling themselves. I think Notre Dame fans, when they get on the road and they win, like they savor that moment. So I feel like Atlanta will benefit from their credit cards in various watering holes across town tonight.
Someone had a comment here. I can't find it right now. Who's ranked higher tomorrow, Notre Dame or Bama? Well, if Georgia loses tonight, as they're expected to do, according to Vegas, Notre Dame will end this week with a better record than both Alabama and Georgia. So,
but do you think they'll be ranked higher than them? I don't think they'll be ranked ahead of Georgia, but the Alabama argument, I think you got to have it at this point, because Alabama has not looked good either.
If Georgia gets blown out, and they're actually about to score right here, but if they get blown out, I think Notre Dame will be ranked higher. I don't think.
Yeah, maybe we should have a podcast about Notre Dame's odds of making the playoff. Does anyone want to hear more about that?
Do you have anyone over at, let's see, both of my ex-employers, The Athletic and ESPN, do they have any data analysts?
Yeah, they've got some mathematicians that will come up with some formulas and whatnot. But look, Notre Dame just needs to keep winning. If they win out, they're in for sure. And they might even be hosting. But at this point, you just got to make it and then take your chances with it. I mean, Notre Dame is so banged up that be curious to see like what roster Notre Dame is actually able to put on the field in a college football playoff game. But based on their performance here tonight, pretty mature, top to bottom. I would bank on them winning out. which has a little bit to do with USC being an absolute abject disaster. So you got that going for you too if you're a Notre Dame fan tonight. And on top of Michigan losing at Illinois. So
not the biggest disaster on Notre Dame's schedule somehow. That would belong to Florida State. A disaster nonetheless. And that would also mean our friend would miss the playoff game probably for his wedding, which judgment free here, but you'll probably be saying I do as you watch it on your phone. And I'd be disappointed in them if they weren't doing that. But Georgia just scored, which means I officially jinxed them, which means it's time for us to wrap up. You enjoy yourself in Atlanta with your new buddies. I'll go back to making sure my kids don't burst through the door here and ruin this live show. And we will reconvene midweek, Mutual Respect Week. We'll have a guest this week. We don't know who, but we will plan on going live again at noon Eastern, 11 Central this Wednesday on The Independent. So until that time, thank you all for cornering Pete last night in the bar, for shouting down his name and the podcast name in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and for always tuning in and asking great questions on The Independent. He's Pete. I'm Matt. We'll see you in a couple days.